John Lennon, a music maestro born in the bustling city of Liverpool on October 9, 1940, is a flame that pierced through the fog of time. Known for his distinctive voice, innovative songwriting, and passionate activism, Lennon's legacy continues to inspire generations worldwide. Biographies of John Lennon often acknowledge his strength as the leader of the most illustrious music group of the 60s and 70s. This brilliance was further proven when the Beatles disbanded in 1970, and Lennon's solo career soared. His name shone even brighter when he released one of his most famous hits, Imagine, which became a global anthem for peace. Lennon had a childhood full of challenges and changes. He was the child of Alfred Lennon and Julia Stanley. However, his early years were far from smooth due to instability in his family. His father, Alfred Lennon, an Irish sailor, was unable to be with his wife on the day of John Lennon's birth because of his job. It is said that on the night Lennon was born, England was under attack by Germany during World War II. In that tense night, coinciding with John Lennon's birth, Julia gave her son the middle name Winston, inspired by her admiration for Winston Churchill, the popular British Prime Minister. John Lennon's parents divorced in 1945 when Lennon was 5 years old. Alfred Lennon, a sailor, was rarely home due to his work and eventually left the family. He did not see much of his son's development during his early years. Julia Stanley, feeling unable to care for John on her own, eventually handed over custody of her son to her sister, Mary Elizabeth Mimi Smith. After his parents' divorce, John lived with his aunt Mimi Smith and her husband, George Smith, in Woolton, a district in Liverpool. Aunt Mimi was a strict and disciplined figure, but she provided a stable environment for Lennon to grow up in. Despite this, Lennon maintained a relationship with his mother, Julia, who often visited and remained a part of his life. Julia was an important figure for Lennon, even though he lived with Aunt Mimi. Julia introduced Lennon to music, teaching him to play the banjo and piano and buying him his first guitar. Meanwhile, Aunt Mimi provided stricter supervision and emphasized the importance of education. The influence of these two strong women in his life, Julia and Mimi, gave Lennon a blend of free spirit and discipline, which later reflected in his musical works. Alongside Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr, Lennon is considered to have successfully written world music history with their success in creating a partnership of musicians and songwriters who complemented each other perfectly. In July 1958, tragedy struck Lennon's young life hard. Julia Stanley was killed by an off-duty police officer while crossing the street near Mimi's home in Woolton, Liverpool. This tragic accident happened just a few blocks from where Lennon lived, leaving a deep scar on him. Losing Julia left Lennon emotionally shattered. The profound sense of loss and pain he felt was reflected in Lennon's later works. Songs like Julia, from the Beatles' The White Album, and Mother, from Lennon's solo album Plastic Ono Band, reveal his deep sorrow over his mother's passing. Lennon married twice, first to Cynthia Powell in 1962 and then to Japanese artist Yoko Ono in 1969. From his first marriage with Cynthia Powell, John Lennon had one child, Julian Lennon, born on April 8, 1963. John Lennon had one child with Yoko Ono, Shone Lennon, born on October 9, 1975. In one of his last interviews, in September 1980, 3 months before his death, Lennon said that he had always been macho and never questioned his chauvinistic attitudes toward women until he met Ono. In the final moments of his life, he took on the role of a house husband and said that he played more of the wife and mother role in their relationship. John Lennon died in New York at the age of 40 on December 8, 1980, after being shot 4 times by Mark David Chapman, a deranged fan. Chapman, who had asked for Lennon's autograph on the Double Fantasy album the day before, claimed he was motivated by jealousy and delusions. In his confession, Chapman stated that he was disturbed by Lennon's luxurious lifestyle and felt compelled to end his life. Various conspiracy theories and mysteries surrounding John Lennon's death suggest that there were powerful forces or a global conspiracy aiming to silence Lennon due to his significant influence on society. Some believe that Lennon was killed by U.S. government agents because of his political views and anti-war activism. However, officially, John Lennon was murdered by Mark David Chapman on December 8, 1980, in front of his apartment in New York City. After being tried, Chapman was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. He has applied for parole since 2000, but his requests have been denied 12 times until 2022. Since his death, like many musicians who die young at the peak of their success, Lennon's persona has become legendary, achieving a form of real immortality. Shortly after his death, Lennon was depicted as a truly pure and innocent figure, not aligned with his personality or sense of humor, or his friends in the Beatles, said Rob Sheffield. Rob is a writer for Rolling Stone magazine. In 2017, he published a book titled Dreaming the Beatles. Without any command, the Dakota apartment was overrun by Lennon fans in the days following his death. The site turned into a sea of flowers and condolence messages. Hundreds of people observed moments of silence on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. Local radio stations played nothing but Lennon and Beatles songs for days. A few days after Lennon's death, a mural appeared on a hidden street in Prague, Czechoslovakia. Similar wall art continued to appear for years afterward, becoming a kind of shrine for Lennon fans. Despite attempts to erase or cover them up, these murals are now major tourist attractions in Prague. The site has become a regular stop for many guided tours in the Czech capital. John Lennon, one of the greatest icons in music history, was known not only as a member of the Beatles but also for his sharp wit, sarcasm, and keen intellect. Behind his magical voice and stirring lyrics, Lennon possessed a personality that often made people feel cornered. Lennon was a master of words, both in his songs and in daily life. Sarcasm was one of his most frequently used weapons. He often made biting, ironic comments to the media, fellow musicians, and those around him. Here are some of his most famous examples. "We're more popular than Jesus now, I don't know which will go first, rock and roll or Christianity." This statement was made by Lennon in an interview with the London Evening Standard in 1966. It sparked a major controversy, particularly in the United States, leading to many radio stations boycotting the Beatles' music and burning their albums. "Before Elvis, there was nothing." This statement is both a tribute and a controversy, as it overlooks the contributions of other musicians who existed before Elvis Presley in the history of rock and roll music. Despite his often controversial personality, it is undeniable that John Lennon was a genius. His song lyrics frequently contained social critiques and profound messages that remain relevant today. As an artist, Lennon always pushed boundaries and challenged the status quo, making him one of the most influential figures in music history.